Hello students, welcome to EPG Parshala. I am Dr. Savita from Maharaja Agrasen University, Badi, Himachal Pradesh. Today we are going to talk on module Taxes of Center and States under the paper Managerial Economics. After completing this module, the students will be able to understand the definition of a tax and cess, understand the difference between direct and indirect taxes, get in depth analysis of various taxes of center and state government, know how value-added taxes, that is VAT, help in eliminating the problem of tax cascading, know the rationale behind proposed introduction of goods and services tax in India. Tax is defined as the compulsory payment without any quid pro quo. Quid pro quo is Latin term for something given or received for something else. This implies that the taxpayer cannot claim equivalent services from the government. Taxation is an important instrument of fiscal policy. The term fiscal policy has originated from the Latin word fisc, which means government treasury. Any government, be it democratically elected or autocratic, needs sources to run a nation. Before the Great Depression of 1930, classical approach of laissez-faire was prevailing. It meant no interference by the government in economic activities. With the Great Depression, policymakers pushed for government to play a more proactive role, and classical economics gave way to Keynesian economics. According to Keynes, whenever an economy faces the problem of recession or unemployment, it becomes responsibility of the government to generate effective demand in the economy. To generate this demand, government spending, also known as public expenditure, plays a major role. To finance this spending, state needs to raise the revenue, and hence role of taxation comes to the fore. India has a federal structure of government, and the taxes of the center as well as states are clearly specified in the Constitution. 7th schedule of Constitution classifies all taxes into 3 lists: on transactions on stock and future market, on sale and purchase of newspapers, advertisement, on railway freight fare, terminal tax on goods or passengers carried by railway, sea or air, interstate trade, corporation tax, etc. List 2 includes state government taxes, which are land revenue, tax on sale and purchase of goods except newspapers, on agricultural income, on land and building, estate duty and succession duty on agricultural land, excise on alcoholic liquor and narcotics, entry of goods in local area, consumption and sale of electricity, vehicle, animals, boats, inland waterways, luxuries including entertainment, betting and gambling, toll, advertisement except newspapers. List 3 includes taxes on the union list which are shared with the states partly or fully. These includes collected and appropriated by state, stamp duties, excise on medical preparation containing alcohol and narcotics, collected by union but 100% to states, succession and estate duty, terminal tax on goods and passengers, railway freight and fares, sale and purchase of newspapers and advertisement therein, stock exchange and future transactions, collected but shared with states. The taxes of center and state government can be put in two broad categories, that is direct taxes and indirect taxes. A tax is said to be direct tax if impact and incidence of the tax is on the same person. Impact of tax means imposition of tax on a particular person, and incidence means burden of the tax. If a taxpayer A can shift the burden on B, then it will be an indirect tax and vice versa. For example, if income tax is levied on a person and he cannot shift it to someone else, then it is a direct tax. On the other hand, taxes like VAT can be shifted to consumer. VAT is an example of indirect tax. Direct taxes. Main direct taxes in India are income tax and corporation tax. Income tax. Income tax is mainly imposed by the central government. The income tax is a progressive tax in Indian context, and alternate tax slabs are presented in the annual budget by the finance minister. Tax on agricultural income is in state domain. When we use the term agricultural income, it doesn't imply merely income generated as a result of cultivating the owned land. It includes any types of rent if land is given on lease by owner and the tenant is cultivating it and rent is being paid to the owner, or revenue if land is used for direct cultivation by owner. Apart from this, if income is from a building in vicinity of agricultural land, this income will also be continued as agricultural income. Corporation tax. As the name only suggests, corporation tax is levied on the income of registered corporations and companies. Registered companies under the Companies Act 1956 are liable to pay corporate tax. They may be public or private. The rate of corporation tax may vary across the assessment years. In India, rate is different for domestic and foreign companies. In addition to tax, surcharge is levied if income above rupees 1 crore Education cess of 3% is levied on the sum of income tax and surcharge irrespective of the level of net income. Education cess on income tax and corporation tax. A cess is an example of earmarking, as the revenue collected through the cess can be used for a specially earmarked purpose only. Education is considered to be a merit good in public economics, as it generates high positive externalities. Therefore, the role of government in education sector becomes very important. This role is not merely limited to provision of education, but also in generating resources for the financing of education. Considering basic education to be a priority, the idea to impose education cess of 2% for elementary education was given in 2004-5. Furthermore, in 2007-8, an additional cess of 1% was introduced to fund secondary education and higher education, and the expansion of capacity by 54% for reservation for socially and educationally backward classes. Now, we will discuss indirect taxes. Indirect tax is a tax levied indirectly as one levied on commodities before they reach the consumer, but ultimately paid by the consumer as part of the market price. In Indian context, principal indirect taxes are custom duties, excise duties, service tax, and sales tax. That is central sales tax and state value added tax. Custom duty is central government tax. Custom duty is imposed on trade. That means it is a tax which a nation collects on goods imported or exported out of the boundaries of the country. Custom duty is levied on import of goods. By definition, for any nation, the territorial water extend up to 12 nautical miles into the sea from the coastline. Therefore, on entering the territorial water, one has to pay import duty. The import duties can be either ad valorem or specific in nature. Mostly in India, import duty is levied at ad valorem rates, though on some commodities, specific import duties are also levied either singly or in addition to ad valorem duties. Export of goods. Export duty is levied on export of goods. As in case of import duty, even in export duty, the liability to pay commences as soon as goods leave the territorial waters. In as the case of import duty, even in export duty, the liability to pay commences as soon as goods leave the territorial waters of India. The different duties under custom duty in India are basic duty, additional duty, anti-dumping duty, protective duty, and export duty. Customs duties in India are administered by Central Board of Excise and Customs under Ministry of Finance. central excise duty. As name suggests, this is also a central government tax. Central excise revenue is the biggest single source of revenue in indirect taxes and second biggest in total taxes after corporation tax. Excise duty is an indirect tax levied and collected on the goods manufactured in India. It is a commodity tax because it is levied on production and has no connection with its actual sale. But from the point of view of tax shifting and determination of incidence, there is little difference between an excise duty and a sales tax. Generally, manufacturer of goods is responsible to pay duty to the government. It is mandatory to pay duty on all goods manufactured unless exemption is given by the government in annual budget. The Indirect Taxation Inquiry Committee 1976 under the chairmanship of L.K. Jha was constituted to suggest reforms in the indirect taxation system. The committee recommended that the central excise duty gradually be transformed into the value added tax at the manufacturer's level with zero rating of exports, while states were advised to adopt a retail sales tax. In its opinion, ad valorem taxes were superior to specific taxes due to their higher income elasticity. Moreover, it stressed on exemption of imports from indirect taxes. Aware of the administrative difficulties involved in introducing this tax system, the Jha Committee recommended that its introduction only at the manufacturing stage, that is manufacturing, should be given a serious consideration. The first major act of reform at the central level was introduction of the scheme of modified value added tax or MODVAT in 1986. Under this scheme, manufacturer could get the credit for taxes paid on inputs against the tax payable on outputs. But MODVAT didn't cover all goods and originally duties paid on capital goods, plant and machinery, etc. were not eligible for credit. In 2001, MODVAT was replaced by CENVAT, that is Central Value Added Tax. Under the CENVAT scheme, a manufacturer of a final product or provider of taxable service was allowed to take credit of duty of excise as well as service tax paid on any input received in the factory or any input service received by manufacturer of final product. Central excise tariff, that is Tariff Act, has been further amended for alignment with the harmonized system of nomenclature. Service tax. Service tax is a tax in central domain. That is, it is a tax of central government. In India, the goods are taxed since a long time, but the same cannot be said for services. Service tax was brought into force with effect from 1st July 1994. Service tax is a form of indirect tax imposed on specific services called taxable services. It cannot be levied on any service which is not included in the list of taxable services. In India, initially only three services, that is telephone, non-life insurance and stock brokerage, were brought under the net of service tax. Over the past few years, service tax been extended to cover new services, excluding the services mentioned in the negative list. Central Sales Tax, that is CST, is the tax levied on interstate sale of goods to registered dealers. It is levied under the Central Sales Tax Act 1956. It is a tax on sale of a commodity. The profit motive is not compulsory for sales tax purpose, as tax is levied on sales and not on profit. While working on the introduction of goods and services tax, that is GST, on the basis of the discussions between the empowered committee, that is EC, of state finance ministers and the union finance minister regarding the compensation package, the Government of India, Ministry of Finance, Department of Revenue issued a notification to bring into effect the new reduced rate of CST. This reduction forms a part of the roadmap for phasing out CST in preparation of introducing Goods and Services Tax GST in 2017. Value added tax, that is VAT. As mentioned earlier also in this module, Jha Committee 1976 was constituted to suggest reforms in the indirect taxation system. The committee gave the opinion that ad valorem taxes were superior to specific taxes due to their higher income elasticity. Moreover, it stressed on exemption of inputs from indirect taxes. Therefore, the committee had recommended that the central excise duty gradually be transformed into a value-added tax at the manufacturer level, while states were advised to adopt a retail sales tax. Observing the merits of value-added framework and noticing the adoption of VAT by many nations of the world with effect from 1st April 2005, like central excise duty, state sales tax was converted into value-added tax framework. A value-added tax gives producers, wholesalers and retailers the benefits of taking input tax credit. It lightens the absolute tax burden on individual taxpayer by eliminating the cascading effect. It also helps in eliminating any unreported or underreported transactions, because any claimant, if he or she wants to take the benefit of input tax credit, will have to show the receipt of payment made for inputs. The concept of cascading and input tax credit can be explained using a simple example. Let's say Mr. A produces cotton and sells it to B in rupees 100. Mr. B uses this cotton as a raw material to make cloth which he sells to Mr. C at 200. Mr. C uses the cloth to make a shirt and sells this shirt for rupees 500 to a wholesaler, Mr. D. Mr. D sells this shirt to a retailer, that is to Mr. E for rupees 1000. And finally, the retailer manages to sell this shirt to a consumer, Mr. F, for 1700 rupees. Now, assuming sales tax as well as VAT rate is 10% on every party involved. Total tax paid under simple cascading type of regime and VAT regime can be compared using the table that is shown here. The VAT may be shifted to next party and may be added in sale price. In that case, A will charge 100 plus 10, that is 110 from B. B will pay 20 rupees as tax but will claim 4 rupees 10 worth of input tax credit and so on. The process will continue till F. The final consumer who may ultimately pay the total tax, that is 10 plus 10 plus 30 plus 50 plus 70, that is 170, which is equal to the tax under sales tax regime. Goods and service tax, that is GST. The government is planning to merge all taxes like service tax, excise and VAT into a common goods and service tax GST by the year 2017. Goods and service tax is a tax on goods and services which is leviable at each point of sale or provision of service, in which at the time of sale of goods or providing the services, the seller or service provider can claim the input credit of tax which he has paid while purchasing the goods or procuring the goods or procuring the services. In this system, not only goods but also services are involved, and the rate of tax on goods and services are generally the same. When GST will be introduced, the service tax provisions as continued in Finance Act 1994 and Service Tax Rules 1994 will be replaced by the provisions of the Central Goods and Service Tax Act and Rules. GST is basically an indirect tax, but since the last burden of this tax is borne by the ultimate consumer, hence for a consumer it is a tax on him. The GST will work only as a centralized taxation system which or with collection of all the tax going to the central government and then shared by the states. The introduction of GST will certainly change the federal system of governance in our country, in which states also have the rights to collect taxes on goods. When GST will be introduced, it will replace the Central Excise Service Tax, VAT and CST. Till date, the center has the monopoly power of the tax on services and states have the power to tax the sale of goods. GST, the Constitution 122nd Amendment Bill 2014 mentions introducing GST by replacing central sales tax, central excise duty, state sales tax and service tax, that is CST plus SENVAT plus VAT plus service tax. GST will be a central domain as well as in state domain. Therefore, it is also being called as dual GST. Only the center may levy an integrated GST, IGST, on the interstate supply of goods and services and imports. The exports will be zero rated. This will be harmonized system of taxation by subsuming all indirect taxes under one tax and move from sources based to destination based taxation. Main merits of GST are broadening the tax base, eliminating cascading of taxes, increasing compliance and reducing economic distortion caused by interstate variations in taxes. The GST Council will consist of the Union Finance Minister, Union Minister of State for Revenue, and State Finance Ministers. The bill empowers the Centre to impose an additional tax of up to 1% on the interstate supply of goods for 2 years or more. This tax will accrue to states from where the supply originates. Parliament may, by law, provide compensation to states for any loss of revenue from the introduction of GST up to a 5-year period. So students, let's now summarize what we have learned in this module. India has federal structure of government and the taxes of the center as well as states are clearly specified in the Constitution. 7th schedule of Constitution classifies all taxes into 3 lists. List 1 includes union government taxes. List 2 includes state government taxes. And list 3 includes taxes on the union list which are shared with the states partly or fully. The taxes of center and state government can be put in 2 broad categories, that is direct taxes and indirect taxes. A tax is said to be direct if impact and incidence of the tax is on the same person. Main direct taxes in India are income tax and corporation tax. income tax is mainly imposed by the central government. Tax on agricultural income is in state domain. As the name only suggests, corporation tax is levied on the income of registered corporations and companies. In Indian context, principal indirect taxes are custom duties, excise duties, service tax, and central and state sales tax, that is VAT. The government is planning to merge all taxes like service tax, excise, and VAT into a common goods and service tax, that is GST, by the year 2017. Thank you.